जिस चीज़ का खदशा था आखिर में वो बात हो ही गई और अमेरिका इस जंग का अब हिस्सा ऑफिशियली जो है वो बन चुका है। इतवार की सुबह हमने देखा कि अमेरिका के बमबारों ने ईरान के 3 न्यूक्लियर साइट्स के ऊपर बमबारी की। बल्कि सिर्फ ये नहीं, इस बात पर भी इरादा किया गया कि अगर ये जंग यहाँ पर इख्तिताम पजीर नहीं होती तो अमेरिका इसका हिस्सा बनता रहेगा और अगर ईरान जो है वो न्यूक्लियर इनरिचमेंट से दूर नहीं रहता और अपना न्यूक्लियर प्रोग्राम जो है वो फारिग नहीं कर देता, ये जंग जो है मुस्तकिल तौर पर जो है वो जारी रहेगी। इन सारी बातों के मुहर्रिकात जो सामने आ रहे हैं, इस खित्ते ऊपर किस तरह के जो है उसके असरात होंगे, लेकिन सबसे इंपॉर्टेंटली पाकिस्तान जो ईरान के साथ सबसे बड़ा बॉर्डर जो है रखता है उसके ऊपर किस किस्म के असरात आएंगे और गल्फ कंट्रीज खुसूसन जो यूएई, कतर जहां पर अमेरिकन बेसिस है वो इस जंग का हिस्सा कितनी देर तक जो है वो नहीं बनेंगे। इन सारी बातों पर बात करने के लिए हमारे साथ मौजूद हैं लैला खातून साहिबा, जो मिडल ईस्ट अनसेंसर्ड मीना का जो रीजन है एक थिंक टैंक जो है वो चलाती है और इन सारी उमूर पर जो है वो काफी उबूर रखती है और काफी गहरी नजर रखती है। थैंक यू वेरी मच फॉर गिविंग अस टाइम लैला। I'd like to begin with the part in which over the weekend we've seen a dramatic escalation in which the United States is now part of the bombing on Iran, and this is forces and the United States. Do you think that other actors will be roped in as well? Because we've seen multiple statements coming in, and apart from condemnations as well as solidarity with the Iranian people, we don't see anything else. Do you think a further escalation, particularly with the Middle East?
Oh, for sure there will be further escalation because the Iranians, the Islamic Republic of Iran, had said before the Americans actually hit Iran that if the Americans intervene directly in this war by targeting Iran, they will be targeting U.S. assets across this region. They haven't specified where, but we do have over basically dozens of U.S. military bases, aside from trade-related basically assets also in this region and diplomatic assets. So at the end of the day, the Iranians will carry out their promise, much like we saw when they actually promised to hit back Israel if the Israelis attack them. And that means further escalation because the Americans are not going to sit silent. They have to save face and attack Iran again, and it's going to expand.
So when we talk about expansion, what do we generally mean? Are they actually going to go, are the Iranians actually going to go after the American bases in the Middle East and the Gulf?
Well, definitely. It's not only the Gulf, but also, remember, there's basically one of the largest U.S. bases found in Iraq, Ain al-Assad, and in other areas also. I mean, the Israeli entity alone is the largest U.S. military base, if you want to call it. It's a U.S. colony. But if you look at the whole situation, this expansion also means other allies being dragged into this. The UK had sent its military assets to the region, including warplanes, last month and earlier this month. And basically that was to support the Americans and the Israelis. So anything that would happen to the Americans and the Israelis, the Iranians will take part. Don't forget that they also have a military base in Cyprus. That means dragging the Eastern Mediterranean region, including Lebanon, Syria, Palestine, and even Jordan at one point in time, into this war. Having said that, Iranian allies include not only the Yemenis, who continue to pound the Israeli entity, but also Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Iraqi resistance in in Iraq, as well as new nascent, what you call military movements that are resistance movements in the region, including the Islamic resistance in Syria that we saw them carry out 2 operations against the Israelis in Syria over the past 4 months, but the media doesn't speak about it that much. The most important part is that the Yemenis had vowed 2 days ago that if the Americans continue with this war and continue to carry out aggression against Iran and continue basically to support the Israelis, they will be targeting America directly in the region.
So there's a lesser known, factor or a variable that appears, and we haven't seen a lot of discussion on it. There's several entities that are non-state actors, and the Middle East has just gone through a major conflict related to the Islamic State. We know that there is presence of Al-Qaeda elements as well as other several elements within these areas. We've seen a suicide bombing in Syria yesterday in the heart of Damascus. If this conflict with Iran escalates, what's the proposition? Is there a fear that there will be a revival of these non-state actors?
Well, it's not a revival as much as basically letting them loose. They are currently on a leash to help Julani's governance in Syria stabilize and basically takes over. But if you look at the whole situation, every single time the Israelis and the Americans are targeted in this region, Al-Qaeda and ISIS move. And we saw yesterday basically ISIS bombarded, claiming responsibility for the suicide attack on the church in Syria, basically in Damascus. Basically, that's the peripheries or suburbs of the capital of Syria. And we have over 50 victims so far, and they're still counting. So I do believe that whenever you corner the Americans and the Israelis, they let loose their own dogs, the terrorist dogs, and they claim that they are Muslims, but they're not. And the ones who stand behind them are what you call the intelligence apparatus, who have planted them in our region, not only to create chaos and divide our region, but also to disfigure Islam. So I do believe that we're going to see further terrorist attacks in the region, not only threatening Syria, but threatening Lebanon, because Hezbollah is in Lebanon, the Lebanese resistance is in Lebanon. So when you move the borders, terrorists across the borders from Syria to Lebanon, because they share one of the largest borders in that region, that's basically a threat to Hezbollah, a stab in its back, as well as basically diverting attention from what's happening in Palestine and elsewhere.
Military strategists, Laila, have been believing that Iran's strength was basically its asymmetrical, forearms like Hezbollah, as well as Hamas, as well as several other militias that are present within Iraq and Syria as well. And once those networks have been dismantled, this is what is believed, Iran's power is kind of less. Do you think that if any major religious figure is targeted, and despite the fact that even if that does not happen, do you think that that kind of traction can be regained and we can see the revival of these groups as well?
I highly doubt that there will be attacks against religious, what you call areas or shrines or what you call mosques in Iran, basically, or elsewhere, unless the Israelis are carrying it out, because they disregard anything that has to do with religion. We've seen them bomb mosques in Lebanon and basically in Palestine and in Yemen. We've seen them bomb churches. They don't care about that. But I highly doubt that they will be basically targeting what you call the religious shrines in Iran, because those hold not only significance to the Iranians, but to the larger Shia community across the world. And we're talking about tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people. Having said that, you also have to remember another thing. You said dismantled, believed that these resistance movements are dismantled. Believed by who? This is a propaganda by the Israelis and the Americans. I've been covering Lebanon for the longest time. And I've been stationed at the front lines in South Lebanon for the past 20 months covering this war. Until today, I can tell you through my contacts from Hezbollah, from Amal Movement and other resistance groups, they still are there. They are not dismantled. In fact, they have now 5 ministers in the cabinet. Their fighters on the ground were estimated at 100,000 before this whole war started. And when we talk about their, what you call gunpowder, like basically the arms, they lost about 20% of their capacity to 30%. This is our own estimates as reporters who know the situation on the ground. So that means they still have 70%, and they haven't used their heavy weapons yet. We haven't seen what you call bombardment that caused massive explosions to insinuate that their heavy missiles.
But do you see the possibility? My question was basically in relation to, we've seen a relative silence and not a very calculated response from Iran as tonight. Do you think that these will chip in, these other groups will chip in?
No, well, they will definitely chip in. This is what I was going to say. Since they still have their capacity, they still have their ability on the ground, and they had vowed over the past week, we've seen them vow that anything that happens to Iran, and if it continues to escalate, they will take part in this war eventually. The Iranians were the first to actually issue a statement. Hezbollah's Secretary General said it basically shy of a week ago that Hezbollah is ready and they are committed to supporting Iran in this war.
नाज़रीन, गुफ्तगू का सिलसिला जो है वो ब्रेक के बाद भी जो है वो जारी रहेगा। गुफ्तगू आपने सुनी जिसमें काफ़ी दिलचस्प पहलू जो है वो डिस्कस हुए। वापस आकर जो है वो बात करेंगे कि अगर ईरान के अंदर डिस्प्लेसमेंट जो है वो होती है, लोग घरों से बेघर होते हैं, तो वो किस तरफ राह जो है वो इख्तियार करेंगे जाने की, और इसके ऊपर भी जो है वो गुफ्तगू करेंगे कि इसका एंड गेम क्या है सारी जंग का, इसका कोई खात्मा भी है कि ये काफ़ी लंबी जंग होने जा रही है। हमारे साथ रहिएगा।